everyone. James in.
James,
How's it going, James?
it's going great. It's going great,
Good,
James. How
good.
you doing?
I'm doing good. So today we're going to talk a little bit about what the process is as far as buying a home, right?
Yeah.
Um, so just to start off, like what happens when you get a client or a lead comes and contacts you and says, "Hey, I want to buy a home." What happens?
Well, yeah, definitely. The number one thing with that is obviously speed to lead. So when a lead comes into my funnel and we want to engage with them right away. So we'll try to get them on the phone. If we do get them on the phone, it's going to be all the wonderful introductions and all that great stuff. Glad we got in touch with you. Going to run through some qualifying questions. Hey, with location, price, mortgage, so on and so forth. What's their motivation and all that good stuff. Definitely want to make sure the mortgage conversation comes up quickly because if they're
Right.
not paying cash, want to make sure to find out what they're qualified for. And
Mm-hmm.
people tend to not think about that very, very clearly because they're thinking, I know I should qualify. I pay rent, I'm on time with that, so I should be able to qualify. But there's some other things that go into it, like debt to income and so on and so forth. But I'm
Mm-hmm.
jumping the gun a little bit. The most important thing is first thing to do when someone comes into the funnel, we want to engage them right away, ask those qualifying questions. And then when the mortgage piece comes up, that's when I always say, I definitely have a preferred lender that I'd like to get you in
Right.
touch with right away. If the call ends before we get fully through that process, I'm going to either set up a email connection between you and me and the client, or the most opportune situation is when you and I can talk offline and say, hey, I'm going to be talking to this buyer lead on Tuesday, Wednesday, maybe
Mm-hmm.
even Saturday at 2 o'clock. Are you going to be around? You say yes. Perfect. So then I'll set up a follow up call so that all three of us can talk on the phone at the same time. And
Right.
that just really builds that rapport and really builds up that relationship where the client feels like, oh my gosh, I'm surrounded by an awesome team. So that's the initial process there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
So
because there's a
so
lot
we
of
and we've
times
done
in
that in the
there.
past. Mhm.
Yeah, a lot of times it's. Yeah, I hear the stories all the time. Is well, I have a client or a lead, and they want to buy a house and they want you to go show them
Yep.
the house, but yeah, they haven't been pre-qualified, even not even pre-qualified. They haven't even talked to
Right.
anybody as far as the lending side goes, and it's not like you're out to going to the store to buy something. You have to
Yeah.
find out what that number is before you start looking. I mean, it's kind of like you're going in blind. I don't, it's kind of weird to me,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
I've been doing it for
Yeah.
so long, so it's like that's weird. Like you're gonna go buy a house and not know what you can buy.
Yeah. You know, I've always used analogies in my practice with real estate. And when I talk to new leads or even following up with, leads that have been in the pipeline for a while, but they just never engaged, I typically run them through an analogy like going to a doctor's office. You
Hmm.
know, you need to be there for some reason, one or the other. But what's going to happen is they're going to pretty much hand you a clipboard and they're going to
Hmm.
ask you to fill out those different questions to figure out what's really going on. How can we best serve you? And so
Right.
once you take in information, you might feel just crappy about something, and you're like, okay, well, let me figure out what's going on. It might just be a fever. It might just be some type of cramp or whatever. You might need
Hmm.
surgery, but I would be really, really feeling really bad if you needed surgery and we just gave you a Tylenol. You
Yeah,
know what I
with
mean?
some
Or vi-
rub, like a yeah.
or vice versa. You know what I mean? You got somebody that's bleeding out in the waiting room,
Yeah. You need
but you say,
stitches,
"Hey,
but here's a
right,
band-aid.
exactly." And so when we take that prescriptive approach towards helping our clients, getting them in touch with you, the lender, is going to be just by far head and shoulders above any other process that I've ever worked with because
Hmm.
we've all been there where we think when new leads come in, it's like a fire drill. We got to rush to get them out to see houses to build that
Hmm.
credibility. But really, that's really doing yourself a disservice and potentially the client a disservice because you're
Right.
wasting time and energy. They're going to fall in love with a house that they cannot afford, or the payment's not where they want it to be because they haven't done some of the things in the beginning to prepare them for getting to the end. And so,
Right.
yeah,
Yeah,
just trying
it's
to get
good to
that.
know, like you said, Well, where are you looking to move? Like what city
Hmm.
or area? Why? Is it
Hmm.
work? Is it school district? Is it you just don't like the area you're in now? And then yeah,
Right.
what the family size is, so okay, well, am I looking for a, 2-bedroom condo or a 4-bedroom house? What's gonna
Hmm.
fit, right? Um, and then yeah, you go from there. And it's always about building that rapport in the relationship to understand what are their needs, right?
Yeah.
And sometimes you go into like a counselor mode, or you're finding out you have to ask these questions like, oh, why are you moving? Where are you looking to move? Oh, I want to move to Everett. Well, why? Well, I work for Bone. You're just constantly asking these questions to gather the information so you can best serve them, right?
That's
That's the only
right.
way you're going to do it. I mean, like the doctor can't help you unless you tell him the symptoms, right?
That's right.
So
Hmm.
you get, and I like the concept of getting on a conference call or a meeting where we're both talking to them, because we're
Hmm.
both asking those questions instead of a repeat, right? And sometimes
Right.
people are just like, man, James just asked me that question, right?
Right.
And so we're just getting that all there. So we're all on the same page, and then we can move forward with the whole pre-approval thing, right?
Yeah.
And that's where a lot of this details come into play. And I like to use analogies as well. And sometimes people are like, well, why do you need this, right? Like, we always require the 2 years W-2s, the pay
Yep.
stubs, and then where is the money coming from for the down payment or the funds to close and the earnest money, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
And we were like, well, why do you need you need all that right now? Well, yeah, you want me to put a puzzle together, but you're not giving me any of the pieces. You're just giving me the box with the picture on it, right? When the
Hmm.
picture is a
Hmm.
house, right? And I'm like,
Right.
well, I
Right.
need the puzzles to make sure we can put it together and you can buy the house, right? So then we get all those pieces, and then we go over scenarios. We're always sending the scenarios like, here's 1, 2, 3 scenarios.
Okay.
What are you comfortable with, or do you have any questions? I always go over these every line by line. Like, this is what this fee's for. This is why we have this. This is what the payment is. This is the down payment. This is if you put this much earnest money, so they know what that bottom line is. And then once they're ready for that, then yeah, we run the pre-approval, and then we get the letter, and then I send it to the client and CC you in that email, so you have that information, right?
Yeah.
Um, and a lot of times, let's say we pre-approve someone for about, let's say 700,000 on a purchase price, and they're always
Hmm.
looking for, they get the max, and then I go, but now you remember, if you're going in and you find that home. If James you find that home, and then let's say it's 650. Well, don't submit the 700, right? So what
Right.
happens at that point? Like, once I send that email back, let people know what happens after they now have a pre-approval.
Well, that's great, and thanks for sharing all that detail because I didn't know how long or how much activity went into all that. Because yeah, we never see the financials and all that good stuff. So
Mhm.
you guys are doing a lot of work in the background, and we really appreciate that.
Right.
So yeah, yeah, and I think with our process, I always like to look at that. Yeah, we have that $700,000 max purchase price pre-approval, and
Mhm.
that's awesome. But we definitely want to look at what's happening in our current market, and that's always really, really key. Because
Mhm.
if there's an opportunity for us to boost the purchase price, or the offer amount based upon the current list price, because there may be some competition, it's good to have some room on the back end. And that's what I really try to advise the clients about. Like, hey, yeah, we're approved for 700, but we might be able to do better looking in that 650, 660 range. And I
Right,
think
right.
that's wise strategy. Another thing that I always try to keep in mind is that there could be HOA fees that go into this
Mhm.
decision making process, and I want to make sure that we have some room to still fit within the guidelines within the pre-approval, without having to call you every 5 minutes about, hey, will this
Mhm.
work, will that work? But I know we will talk eventually again once we come back around to writing and presenting an offer. But yeah, once you get that pre-approval to me, they're fired up and ready to go. And that's when I really put my tools, the resources to use. Because see, at EXP, we have this fantastic Home 360 app. It works just like all your other mainstream home search apps, but it personalizes and synchronizes the communication between me and the client. So I can see the homes that they're putting hearts by and stars and favoriting.
Hmm.
And so that way I can start doing some research, maybe get out and preview those properties to see what type of activity we have going on in the market so that we can look at those, schedule them, and get out and see them before we miss out. And then
Right.
yeah, and then that's really how we do in this process, and that's my part of the puzzles putting together piece part. And again, it just works as a good unit because they know they got a solid pre-approval, they got an agent out looking for them and taking them on tours. And typically I find that within 2 to 5 visits out in the marketplace, we're going to find something that's going to fit their needs.
Hmm. Yeah,
Hmm.
because we have, we have I have the mobile app, right? We use
Hmm.
that mobile app. We send it out to the client, and that mobile app has the mortgage calculator on it. So I get a
Yeah.
lot of, hey James, if it's this and XX, right? And I'm just like, you use the mobile app? And they're like, oh yeah. I'm like, because I can easily just go in and price a rate and go, well, this is what the interest rate looks like for you today, right?
Yeah.
And
Hmm.
then they can go in and say, oh, here's this listing, and then they could put in the numbers, and there's even amortization schedule in there so they can see all that good stuff, right? So we go through that. The client calls you, you have a conversation, we set up a meeting, have that
Yep.
conference call, then I have the conversation and gather those puzzle pieces to do the financing, to structure everything, right? And then they go back to you, right? You're
Hmm.
already you have an idea of what they're qualified for, and then you go out and
Hmm.
search, and then they have the 360 system,
Home
right?
at. Hmm.
Home, and then it's all about, really, it's just about the gathering of the information to help
Hmm.
find what's get for them, right? To find out
Right.
what we can find for them. Then you go out and you guys go out and look at homes, let's say, right?
Hmm.
At that point, like, what's that process? And I mean, typically they work on or they're off on the weekend, so you're working on the weekend, right? So do you like schedule, do you, based off the app, do you say, hey, let's go look at these homes, and then and then throw in a few other options, or how do you go about doing that?
That's a great question, and that's a great point that you called out because yeah, they're going to look at the homes that they see, but I'm also going to be looking at homes that they don't see, and I think
Hmm.
that's what creates that professional advisory, trusted advisory kind of position, that relationship we're building. Because when I bring up off-market properties or other homes that have been on the market longer that they just may have overlooked, because yeah, the new homes that come on the market, they're usually going to be at the top of the list, and then the older
Right.
ones are going to be at the bottom. I'll bring that up to their attention and say, hey, you're available, say you want to get things done between 11 and 3 in the afternoon, we're going to go ahead and set up our schedule. Our system gives us an opportunity to map out logistically where it makes sense, where we're not driving north south north south.
Right.
We'll
Yeah.
make a we'll make a big loop from start to finish, and then usually it brings us right back to our close to starting point, and then we'll
Mm.
tour 3, 4, 5 homes. I typically try to keep that search to around 5 homes maximum, for the main
Mhm.
reason that once we start seeing more than 5 homes on one particular tour, we're going to pretty much forget homes 1 and 2. And
Right.
then we end up having to maybe go back and see 1 and 2 again if we see too many homes at the same day. And
Mhm.
all along that process, especially if we're looking at resale homes, homes that have been sold before and now they're being sold for a second, third, or fourth time, there's no perfect house, and we make sure to have that
Right.
conversation right away so that we look at everything on basically a 1 to 9 scale, one being the worst, nine being the best. And once we
Mhm.
start figuring out where do these homes fit on the 1 to 9 scale, then we start coming back to the point where we're going to say, okay, we've seen these homes, what do you think? And typically I like to either find a place where we can either meet after the tour, or maybe the final home that we look at is vacant and we can sit there and talk in the kitchen at the countertop or something like that and go over
Mhm.
all the details of all the homes that we toured for that day. And
Right.
if we've done our job right and we got the location down, we got the price right, we typically gonna end up making an offer at the end of that at the
Hmm.
end of that process.
What I always recommend to clients is you have your phone, right?
Uh-huh.
And there's a camera on it, right?
Yeah.
And
Amazing.
like, because you just brought up, like, if you look at 5 homes, when you get to that fourth home, you forgot what home one looked like, right? So I
Mhm.
always say, hey, get your video out and just when you're doing the walkthrough, when you're viewing the home, take a video,
Yeah.
right? So then that way you can always go back and just refresh your memory because maybe you forgot something. One
Right.
time I had a client, they had hooks in the ceiling, and I walked in with them just because I was in the area, and I was like, "Why are these hooks all in the ceiling?" Like, "Oh, they used to grow marijuana in here." And I'm like, "Oh, okay." And then 5 homes later, they're like, "Well, we really like that first home." Like, "Yeah, but you remember the hooks in the ceiling?"
That's funny.
uh,
Yeah.
what happens at that point of submitting an offer? Like,
Oh yeah.
what's the process of that?
Yeah. So, um, first thing we're going to do is obviously we're going to settle on a purchase price, and we try to. When I say purchase price, meaning the home is listed for a certain dollar amount. We may not offer that amount. We may offer a little less. We may offer the full price. We may go a little higher. But what I want to do is I'm going to pull up the comps that are surrounding that area and that particular listing, and to see
Mhm.
how home sales have performed recently. So if there's a strong case to come in at full asking price, then I'm going to recommend that. But ultimately, I want to advise the client on here's where the offers can be seen to be particularly realistic or unrealistic, meaning sellers are not going to accept, $50,000 under asking price in most cases, unless the home has been
Mhm.
sitting for a while. But if it's a new listing under a month on the market, it's a pretty good chance that we need to come in close to full asking price, and then we start talking about contingencies, whether we're going to need to do the financing piece, whether we're going to talk about how much earnest money, or do we want to make the earnest money non-refundable? Are we going to want to do a home inspection? Which I always recommend they do a home inspection, but home inspections typically have a base turnaround time of 10 days. We can actually relax that 10-day window to less than that to make our offer
Mhm.
more attractive to the seller, because once we go under contract at pending inspection status, if it's 10 days on the market and you don't like the house or something comes up unfavorable from the inspector's report, now the seller has lost 10 days on the market advertising to other potential buyers. So
Mhm.
sellers don't want to see 10-day inspection windows. They want to see them, 2, 3 to 5 days or less.
Right.
And so, yeah. And so once we get that offer price situated, then we're gonna prepare the offer, and then we're gonna again reach out to you again and say, hey, we're gonna be
Mhm.
making an offer. I'm gonna let you know that I'm gonna copy you on my introduction to the listing broker, and that
Mhm.
way when the offer goes in, we can have you follow up with a phone call directly to a listing broker and say, hey,
Right.
I work with James, and here's our offer. Here's our buyer. The buyer is well qualified, and you can speak to all the different fun things that you discuss to kind of
Right.
help push the deal through, because you and I are both connected here. We want to see the client be serviced and win the
Right.
offer. So yeah.
Yeah. And that's typically what, it's I get the email or the call or text or whatever it is, and
Hmm.
it's like, "Hey, we found a home. We're gonna put an offer on it. Here's the earnest money amount," right? And that's something it's a side note on the earnest money. But um, yeah, when I see that email, that's when I immediately call that listing agent and like, "Hey, listing agent, James Hagelin's leader one. Do you have any questions about, how solid they are? If there's going to be any hiccups, like what's our turn time, stuff like that, right?
Yeah.
Because it's that contact to know that we are here. So if you have any questions, we will answer because they have their client to take care of too, right? The
Yeah.
seller.
Hmm.
So it's yes, it's a pre-approval. It's not a pre-qualification. There's two different things there that we'll talk about later in maybe
Hmm.
another video. um, so, but that's how I've learned to work that way is because then this client has a good team behind them and they're going to make sure this gets done, right?
Hmm.
And then on our side, we want it to get done for the client, right? Because that's our duty.
Yes.
It's what we do. But I want to go back to like you brought up the earnest money. because I get a lot
Mhm.
of questions too when I'm going through that pre-approval process. Is, we go down line by line on fees and payment and stuff, and I say, well, depending on the earnest money, and I clients always like, well, what is that amount? What is an amount like that? How do you determine how much earnest money you should put in with the offer?
You know, there's no one size fits all answer when it comes to earnest money. You
Right.
know, the essence of the earnest money is to show the seller that you have a earnest willingness to buy the home. So my standardized advice to clients is usually 1 to 3% of the total purchase price should be
Mm-hmm.
something that you consider for your earnest money deposit. So, you get a
Mm-hmm.
$500,000 home, you're thinking about $5,000 down payment of earnest money. But
Right.
the most important thing to think about is the fact that sometimes, you may need to be a little bit more aggressive to make a big splash, so to speak. So, if you can offer, you know, $20,000, in earnest money. It shows that you're well qualified and you're serious about making this purchase. And so that's something that really can be attractive to the seller to say, hey, they're going to commit $20,000 to earnest money, and that can make your offer stand out considerably higher than other offers.
Right. Right.
Hmm.
'Cause I have seen it, yeah, there's a variable. Some I've seen it $1,000, and some I've
Hmm.
seen, 20, $30,000, and it's just a case by case too. But I just sometimes I get that question. I'm like, well, let's ask the real estate agent, right? So then we got into what happens when you get a lead, what happens when I get a lead, when we get in contact with the client, and then we also talk about the shopping and the activities and how you go about it, and then what happens when we submit the offer. And I think on the next round of what we do when we talk is going to be what's that process from contract and the process to close. So
Fair
I want
enough.
to thank you for your time, and of course we're going to be hopefully doing this more
Oh, absolutely.
more often than later.
Yes, yes. And I hope that the audience finds this very helpful. We love to do this. I love to do this. I'm glad that we had
Right,
this opportunity. James and James, we just have just a great connection, and we're going to service our clients with just the greatest care and service. So I love it.
right. Yeah, so if anybody they like the content, they like the information, hit a like, subscribe, ask your questions in the comments,
Yeah.
or reach out directly to us. We're here, I'd say 24/7, but we got to sleep too, right? So, thanks again, James, and I'll talk with you later.
You're welcome, James. Appreciate you.